welcome back to Admit One. As always, I'm your host, Jonathan Kubiak, and today we will be joined by Jared Ratner, a current senior at today's featured school, my alma mater, the University of Southern California. But first, let's take a look at today's big number and get into today's headlines. Today's big number is 6%. This is a threshold for automatic admission into the University of Texas at Austin for graduates of in-state high school. Those who graduate within the top 6% of their class are entitled to enrollment under Texas state law that mandates 90% of incoming freshman students be in-state residents, with 3/4 of those automatically admitted. Now for today's news. The English government has announced that providing essay writing services to students in exchange for a fee will now be considered a criminal offense. Terming these institutions essay mills, officials believe that the move will crack down on deceptive marketing techniques of contract cheating services. According to the British Broadcasting Company, nearly 1 out of every 7 students in the UK admits to academic dishonesty. This new legislation hopes to make clear the ramifications for such conduct while also providing resources to prevent students from feeling the need to turn to such essay mills in the first place. The University of Pennsylvania announced changes to its policy regarding letters of recommendation. The Ivy League school will no longer require 2 letters of recommendation from teachers, instead allowing students to fill one of these spots with a letter from an outside recommender. Applicants are still required to submit a letter from their guidance counselor, however. Nonetheless, this change in policy comes on the heels of nearly 2 years of remote instruction, where students may not have had the opportunity to build rapport with their teachers in the classroom. UPenn's new Dean of Admissions, Whitney Soule, says that she hopes this flexibility in choosing a third recommender gives students a chance to introduce themselves to Penn in a way that feels great to them. That's it for today's news. Please stay tuned for our conversation with Jared Ratner, and we'll see you tomorrow. All right, and welcome back to Admit One. I'm your host, Jonathan Kubiak, and today we are joined by Jared Ratner, a current senior at the University of Southern California. As I said earlier, that is my alma mater, so we're going to be talking to Jared a little bit about his process deciding on USC and where to go from here. So, Jared, if you could reflect back on your time in high school and tell our audience a little bit about what made you settle on this university. I mean, it's a top 20 university in the country, so I would assume you kind of had your choice as far as where to go. What was it about SC that really made you say, this is where I want to spend the next 4 years?
Hey, everyone. Super happy to be here. So USC was actually the last school that I applied to and the last one that I even thought of. It was initially, I had applied early decision to Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania, and I had a legacy because my father had gone there, and I had been deferred and was really upset about that initially, but continued to apply to more schools. And it had actually been a random friend that I knew that had been really obsessed with USC and been talking about it. And I was like, seems pretty interesting. Looked it up, seemed like a pretty cool place, and ended up applying. And then I really wasn't too sold on it or considering too hard until I visited. But once I came, I really saw the campus, and the tour that I had there sold me. And it was pretty much in the end, the decision I had came down to USC, Emory, Michigan, and the University of Florida. I'm from Miami, so I kind of wanted to get out of state, escape, just like kind of like, I love my friends from high school, but wanted to just venture out, see some new things. So it really, once I visited the schools and saw USC and learned everything about the programs and extracurriculars and just everything going on here, it was a no-brainer.
So you mentioned that you had applied early to Wharton. Were you focused on applying to business schools across the board, or did you have any variation in the programs that you were looking at?
Yeah, so pretty much I was applying to business schools mainly. There were a few schools that I applied to that didn't necessarily have entirely business-devoted programs. It was more like econ or something like that that would lead you on a business path, but primarily business programs.
And so now you've spent much of your education in the Marshall School of Business at USC. Have you branched out and picked up any minors, anything like that while you've been here, or have you really focused and doubled down on that pure business approach?
So actually, I spend the bulk of my time now not doing business. I have two minors or pursuing two minors in computer programming and applied analytics. So I've really honestly, and I'm currently working part-time for a cybersecurity company doing just pretty much database design, data analytics there. So I'd say I honestly have ventured pretty far away from the business side and more moved more towards the computer science side.
Interesting. So would you say that I understand that your primary education with Marshall is a little bit tangential to what you're doing in the workplace, but were the skills that you used to pick up this job taught at USC, or were those things that you went out and attained on your own?
So I'd say a lot of it is a combination. It's so my official role is a data analyst. And while the technical knowledge and being able to do formulas, code, and everything is great, there's a really important business aspect, being able to make sense of data, be able to present things in certain ways, be able to see what the higher ups and executives want. So even though my job is mainly devoted to technical work, I'd say my business knowledge kind of steers the way that I do it. So without what I've learned in Marshall and what I've done there, I'd say what I do really wouldn't be possible. And even though some of the programming languages and such I picked up at jobs and internships outside of school, I'd say it's what I learned in school led me to there. So it's all kind of a stepping stool. It's a ladder.
Has USA played any direct role in helping you land any of those internships or jobs, or are those also things that you have gone out on your own and taken care of?
So the job I'm currently working at, I actually applied to through Handshake, which is USC's pretty much job searching and job matching portal. So that's how I learned about the role, where I applied to it through. My previous internships had been more through connections and people I had known. But for this one, I definitely say USC's resources helped me land the job.
Gotcha. So when you were in high school and you were thinking about business and you were thinking about all these different schools and very reputable programs and undergraduate departments of business, what extracurriculars were you getting involved in? What types of activities were you doing on the side? Were you starting your own business? What were you doing to really prepare yourself to apply and stand out and say, hey, I deserve a spot in a top 10 business school, and this is why you should give it to me?
Yeah. So in high school, I really tried to paint a complete story for myself and tried to make business really part of my identity in in most of my application. So a few things I did. I worked for a music festival called Ultra Music Festival, and I did photography and content creation. And through this, I pretty much ran their merchandising Instagram page. So it was a lot of business related decisions because it was I needed to decide which products to promote, which ways to do it. So it really, I think that was one of the big high points of my application. And another thing I really did was I've been selling sneakers actually since I was in sixth grade. And it's really, even though something like that might seem like more of a hobby, business schools really value when you're able to illustrate that you completed activities that show that you know how to conduct business, you know how to make deals, you know how to negotiate. So a lot of things like that just really, I think, were valuable. And then in school itself, I was involved in student government. I was the president of National Honor Society, and I did debate. So just different activities to show that pretty much very important for business school is to prove that you're a leader. So having some leadership positions in your extracurriculars in high school is really helpful.
Was there anything that you wish you had done differently while you were in high school? Something that you feel like would have set you up or prepared you better to start at Marshall or start at USC in general?
That's a great question. Uh, I'd say I'm pretty happy with a lot of the things I did. I'd say maybe one of the things I could have focused a little bit away from was taking classes that weren't necessarily things I'd pursue or be interested in just to add to my resume. Because the attention that I diverted to, say, AP chemistry or AP physics, I could have done to instead pursue more business ventures. And I think since I was applying to business school, that would have been more helpful and would have been things I enjoyed doing more.
So you think that if you had remained more rooted in your specialization as opposed to trying to go out and be more broad-based, that that would have been more helpful?
Absolutely. But also at the same time, reflecting a little bit more. before taking those classes, I really was considering going into a more science, STEM, pre-med sort of field. And really, it was taking those that showed me that I enjoy business and just data more. So even though hindsight is 2020, it maybe would have benefited me more now. I really wouldn't have known whether or not I would wanted to do that. So it really does go both ways.
So the value of taking those courses at this juncture of your life is really that allowed you to figure out exactly what your passion was rather than anything inherent in the curriculum itself.
Exactly. And I'd say a lot of that goes to, for example, when I was at USC, I took a Python coding class on a whim. And then that set me off on an entirely different path where I've done all this data analytics. So really, without taking those classes in high school, I might not have known.
Gotcha. Now, Jared, I wanted to ask a little bit more about your extracurricular involvement in college and how that compared to high school. I know you mentioned that a lot of the things that you were involved in, a lot of the activities you were doing, those weren't necessarily affiliated with your high school per se, but they were still things that you used to put on your resume as extracurriculars and in your estimation are things that were very valuable into actually getting you into business school. So if you could just speak a little bit more about what outside ventures you have continued doing in college and how that may or may not have changed since you were a high school student.
Absolutely. So something I actually failed to mention before, one of the biggest extracurriculars I did was tennis. And in high school, I'd say that did help boost my resume a lot because I was the captain of that team. So that really shows leadership, taking initiative. And that's something I've continued in college. I'm on the club tennis team here, which is actually really competitive. I've very much enjoyed participating there. And I'm the social chair on that team. So pretty much I've scheduled all our dinners, all our get togethers, different activities. And it's been really fun. And I've really enjoyed facilitating everybody, getting to know each other, and honestly creating events that people have really enjoyed. And in
So,
terms of, oh, sorry, go ahead.
so as fun as that is, that's still, a very important role. And that's still something that kind of, as you mentioned earlier, employers and, grad school admission officers want to look and see these are areas where this individual is taking the opportunity to exercise and exhibit leadership.
Absolutely. So a great instance of that is I was responsible for running tryouts in which we had over 120 different people trying out for around 10 to 15 spots. So
Wow.
we also have 6 tennis courts. So it's definitely very chaotic to organize and facilitate that entire process. And pretty much, I was recently discussing it with one of my managers. I currently work part time as well as being a part time student. And she found it very impressive. And that really showed me the value of these other extracurricular activities and how that can help you just as much as taking courses in certain classes.
Gotcha. So, in your estimation, how has your balance of all of these different outside ventures and all of your different in classroom interests, how have those come together to prepare you for the next chapter of your life once you leave USC?
I'd say they've prepared me very well. It's pretty much, yeah, I'd say that the knowledge that I've gained here, the leadership skills that I've picked up through everything, and just a lot of the technical knowledge, the relationships I've made, the networks I've built, I've set me up for success to a very large extent. It's walking out of this, I'm going to be graduating in the spring, and I'm very confident that I'm going to be able to get a good job and that things are going to be good. I really do feel that USC and college and everything I've done has prepared me well.
Is there anything in particular that stands out to you that you wish was maybe a little bit different about not just your personal experience as a USC Trojan, but something about the school or Marshall in particular that you wish or believe could have been a little bit better, a little bit more helpful?
So obviously the transition to COVID was very difficult. And that's something that I'm sure I don't need to explain to any of the viewers here. But I'd say even though USC did a pretty good job of shifting to Zoom, I really didn't get a lot out of some of the classes that we did there. It was, I don't know, I'd say some of the business classes, it's in the end, especially, you do have the opportunity to take 3 upper division electives in a particular area that you like. But especially the shift to COVID for the classes that I wasn't necessarily as interested in, it became a little bit easier to drift away. So I'd say something that I'd like more is a bit more freedom to choose our curriculum. Because again, only having the option for 3 electives is a little bit restrictive. So I feel like that's one thing that Marshall could be doing better.
Gotcha. Well, on the flip side of that, is there one thing that stands out to you about USC that is, whether it's academic, extracurricular, cultural, something about the university that you wish every single university in the country, in the world for that matter, was able to offer to their students?
Yeah, so I'd say a really big thing about that is just the network, and as we call it, the Trojan family. It's anywhere in the world I've been. Like I've been in Asia and Europe with my family, and I've worn a shirt that says USC, and I've had random people coming up to me going, "Oh, fight on." That's our motto, and just talking about that. So it's really something that I've seen people all over the world are proud to be USC alumni, and that they really do try to give back and continue to interact with the students. And that's something I'm really proud to be a part of.
Gotcha. Well, Jared, we're about out of time. I just want to thank you so much for coming on our program and sharing your insights. And as always, fight on.
Thank you so much for having me. Fight on, John.